Ever feel like you're kind of stuck, like at the mercy of everything going on around you? If our thoughts really do create our reality, like a lot of people say, why is it so hard to change things?
Well, that's a big question.
We're diving into Neville Goddard's The Power of Awareness, and we'll be using his audiobook on YouTube as our guide for this one.
Yeah, it's a question that's fascinated people for centuries, really. And Neville Goddard, he offers a pretty unique perspective, I think.
Mm.
He says we often just misunderstand the true nature of consciousness and how it all works and its role in shaping our lives.
Okay, so more than just like positive thinking.
Yeah, much more. Goddard's central premise is that consciousness is the only true reality. Everything else, the events, the circumstances, the physical world, all products of consciousness.
Whoa, okay, so that's a pretty radical idea. You're saying that like the world we see and experience is basically like a projection of our minds.
In a way, yeah. Think of it like a dream. When you're dreaming, you create the entire world of the dream. The people, the places, the objects, it all comes from your consciousness.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. But if that's true, why can't we just like think ourselves into $1 million or a dream vacation? Doesn't seem to work that way for me.
It's not quite that simple. Goddard says that the key to manifesting our desires is understand the power of assumption.
Okay, assumptions.
Our assumptions
That's where things start to get interesting.
about ourselves and the world, they literally shape our reality.
But couldn't that just be like a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like if I assume I'm going to fail, I probably
Yeah.
will, right?
That's part of it, but it goes deeper than that. Goddard suggests that our assumptions operate on a much more fundamental level, shaping the very fabric of our experience.
Okay.
He compares it to a piece of steel. The steel itself doesn't change, but you can magnetize it or demagnetize it by rearranging its molecules.
So our consciousness is like the steel.
Exactly. Qualities like health, wealth, success,
Mhm.
they already exist within the infinite realm of consciousness.
Wow.
It's a matter of arranging our own consciousness to manifest them, much like magnetizing the steel.
So the potential for everything is already there, just waiting to be tapped into.
Right.
But how do we actually do that? Do we just need to like think positive thoughts all the time?
It's not just about positive thoughts. It's about aligning your entire being, your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, with what you want to experience.
Okay.
And that's where the power of assumption comes in.
I'm starting to see the picture here. So if I want to like change my reality, I need to change my assumptions about it.
Precisely. And Goddard, he gives some incredible examples in his book that illustrate how this actually works in real life.
Okay.
There's the story of this costume designer who was always clashing with her boss.
Oh, yeah, I read that one too.
She assumed he was difficult and unfair, and their interactions were always tense.
Yeah. But couldn't her boss's behavior just be attributed to other factors?
Right.
How can we be sure it was just because of her assumptions?
It's a valid point, but what's interesting is that once she started to consciously change her assumptions,
Okay.
her boss's behavior shifted dramatically.
Wow. So she like actively worked on changing how she saw him.
Exactly. Instead of dwelling on his negative qualities, she started assuming that he was supportive and appreciative of her work.
Okay.
She imagined having good interactions with him, feeling the relief and satisfaction of a harmonious working relationship.
And that like actually changed the way he treated her.
It did. He became more encouraging, more collaborative, even going out of his way to acknowledge her contributions. It was as if her internal shift in perception had like rippled out into the external world.
That's a really powerful example. Like it suggests that our inner world can have an actual impact on our outer circumstances.
It really can.
Is there another story from the book that shows this concept?
There's a fascinating story of a businessman who desperately wanted his family name on one of the most prestigious buildings in his city.
I'm guessing he didn't just hire a sign painter.
Not quite.
Huh.
He decided to use the power of assumption. Every single day, he would walk by that building and vividly imagine seeing his family name on the signage. He felt the pride, the satisfaction, the sense of accomplishment, as if it was already real.
He like literally imagined it into being.
He did.
Dad.
And what happened? He persisted with this practice for 2 years. And as fate would have it, the company that owned the building eventually faced financial difficulties.
They went bankrupt.
They went bankrupt, and his family was able to acquire the building.
Wow.
He firmly believed that his consistent assumption that deep inner knowing had played a role in shaping the outcome.
These examples are incredible. They suggest that our assumptions really do have the power to influence events,
Absolutely.
even in situations that seem impossible.
Right. It's about recognizing that we're not just passive observers of life. We have the power to participate in shaping our reality.
This is all so fascinating, but I gotta admit, I still have trouble with this idea of letting go of control. I mean, if I'm trying to manifest something, shouldn't I be taking action to make it happen?
Action is important, but it needs to flow from the right state of consciousness.
Okay.
Goddard makes a crucial distinction between resisting unwanted circumstances and renouncing them.
So we're not just supposed to, like, grit our teeth and power through.
Resistance actually gives those negative circumstances more power.
Hmm.
It's like shining a spotlight on what you don't want,
Okay.
amplifying its presence in your reality.
So if I'm constantly worrying about a deadline, I'm actually feeding the anxiety and making things worse.
Precisely.
Okay.
Renunciation, on the other hand, involves shifting your focus away from the unwanted situation and towards what you desire.
So it's not ignoring the problem, but changing how you see it.
Exactly. It's
Uh,
about consciously choosing where you direct your mental and emotional energy.
Okay.
Imagine you're standing in a dark room with a flashlight.
Okay.
You have the power to choose what you illuminate.
So instead of shining the light on the problem, we focus on the solution. That makes sense. But what about when the solution just seems impossible? How can we make ourselves believe in something that feels so far away?
That's where Goddard introduces the concept of preparing your place. It's tied to his idea that creation is already finished,
Right.
that everything already exists in a kind of cosmic blueprint.
Wait a minute. Is this suggesting our future is like predetermined? Doesn't that go against the idea that we can create our own reality?
Not necessarily. It's more like all possibilities already exist, and we have the power to choose which possibility we experience.
Okay.
We do this by preparing a place for it in our consciousness.
I'm intrigued. But how do we prepare a place for something that doesn't exist yet in our
Uh,
physical reality?
By assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled,
Okay.
by stepping into the emotional state that would naturally come with the realization of our desire.
So it's not just visualizing the outcome, but feeling it as if it were already true.
Exactly.
Huh.
Let's say you want to live in a beautiful home by the ocean. Instead of just picturing the house, imagine yourself walking through the rooms,
Yep.
feeling the warmth of the sun, smelling the salty air.
Okay.
Engage all your senses to make it feel real.
So it's about experiencing the feeling of already having it, not just wanting it.
Right.
Makes sense. It's like planting a seed and then taking care of it with our attention and belief.
Exactly.
But what about those times when doubt creeps in? You know, those nagging voices that tell us it's not possible?
Yeah.
How do we overcome that?
That's where tension comes in.
Attention. So it's not enough to just wish for something. We have to actively focus on it.
Our desires only gain power when we give them our attention. Instead of dwelling on what we lack, we need to immerse ourselves in the feeling of already having what we want.
It's about thinking from the end, not just of it.
Right.
Feeling the joy of achieving a goal, the relief of overcoming a challenge even before it happens in the physical world.
Exactly.
But I imagine that takes a lot of mental discipline, especially in a world that's full of distractions.
It does. But the more we practice, the more we strengthen our ability to control our thoughts and emotions. It's like working out a muscle.
This is all so empowering. But let's be real here. We all experience setbacks, failures.
Right.
How does Goddard address those moments when our faith is tested?
That's a great question, and we'll dive into that in part 2 after a quick break.
So before the break, we were talking about how to handle, those setbacks and failures
That's
life
right.
throws at us.
Mm.
If we're really creating our reality with our thoughts,
Mm.
how do we explain those times when things just don't go according to plan?
Well, Goddard says that failure is just a natural part of the whole creative process.
Okay.
It's not a sign that the law of assumption isn't working. It's
good.
more an opportunity to kind of refine our approach.
So we shouldn't see setbacks as like proof that we're doing something wrong.
Exactly. Goddard says one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to force things to happen through willpower or external action alone.
Okay, so it's not enough to just visualize the outcome we have to like align our actions with our inner knowing.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between inner and outer, between imagination and action.
Okay.
He uses this analogy of planting a seed. We wouldn't dig it up every day to see if it's growing, would we?
Right.
We need to trust the natural process, allow our desires to take root and blossom in their own time.
That's a helpful analogy. But I think a lot of people struggle with patience, especially these days. How do we reconcile that need for persistence with like the idea of surrendering to the process?
Goddard suggests that the key is cultivating a sense of detachment from outcomes.
Detachment. Isn't that kind of contradictory to intensely desiring something?
It might seem that way, but it's about finding that sweet spot between focused intention and a willingness to let go of the need to control every single step of the journey.
So we're holding the vision, but like releasing the need to micromanage how it manifests?
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about trusting that the universe, or what Goddard calls infinite intelligence, has a way of making things happen in a way that serves our highest good.
That takes a lot of faith, especially when we're dealing with desires that seem really big or challenging.
It does. But that's where the real magic happens.
Okay.
Goddard reminds us that with God, all things are possible.
Now, when you say God, you're not talking about like the traditional religious figure, right?
Not necessarily. Goddard's idea of God is more aligned with the idea of I am consciousness,
Okay.
the infinite creative power that we all have inside of us.
So it's like that inner voice we hear sometimes, that intuition or gut feeling.
Exactly. And when we tap into that power, when we align ourselves with it, we open ourselves up to like unlimited possibilities.
Okay, that makes sense to me. But I can see how for some people that idea of surrendering to a higher power might feel like they're losing control, even scary.
I understand that perspective.
Mhm.
But Goddard's idea of surrender is actually really empowering.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we're not separate from this infinite creative power, that we can co-create our reality in partnership with it.
So like a dance between our individual will and this universal intelligence.
That's a great way to put it. It's about aligning our will with the divine will,
Right.
trusting that we're guided and supported, even when we don't know what's coming next.
I'm really starting to get this. Are there any like practical tips Goddard gives for cultivating this sense of faith and surrender, especially when doubt creeps in?
He says gratitude is super important.
Okay.
Appreciating what we already have puts us in that flow of abundance.
So shifting our focus from what we're missing to what we already have.
Exactly. And he also says to practice feeling the joy of the wish fulfilled even before it shows up in our physical world.
So even if I haven't reached my goal yet, I can still feel happy and satisfied as if I already have.
Precisely. It's about choosing to experience the feeling that goes with the reality we want to create.
This is such a great reminder that we have way more control over our inner world than we realize.
We really do.
But we have to talk about the potential downsides of this power.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can manifest anything we want,
Right.
what's stopping people from using it for selfish or even harmful reasons?
That's an important question. And Goddard does talk about ethics in his work.
Okay.
He says the law of assumption works the same for everyone.
Okay.
It doesn't care if our desires are good or bad.
So we have to be responsible with this power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our thoughts and actions have consequences not just for us, but for others too.
Right.
He encourages us to make sure our desires are for the highest good, to use our creative power to make things better for everyone.
Makes sense. Our thoughts and actions create ripples. You know, they affect the world around us.
Precisely. Goddard believed we're all connected, that our individual consciousness is part of a larger collective consciousness.
So it's not just about personal gain, it's about making the world better for everyone.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our individual destinies are tied to the destiny of humanity as a whole.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah.
Consciousness, the power of assumption, surrender ethical considerations.
So
What's next? What's the next step for someone who wants to put this into practice?
that's a great question, and one we'll get into in part 3.
Okay, so we've been really digging into this whole idea, that we're not just watching life happen, but we're actually creating it.
Right.
But like for someone who's never heard this before, where do they even start?
Well, that's where the real journey begins. Goddard says, start small.
Okay.
Pick a desire that feels within reach, something you want, but haven't really believed was possible.
Like finding a parking spot right in front of the store.
Yeah.
Or maybe like having a super productive day where you just knock everything off your to-do list.
Yeah, exactly. Those little wins, those can be powerful. They
Yeah.
really can. As you see the law of assumption working, in your everyday life, your belief, it's going to grow naturally.
It's like anything else, right? The more you do it, the better you get at it.
Absolutely.
You start to realize those coincidences might not be so coincidental after all.
That's it. You start seeing the link between what you're assuming and what you're actually experiencing.
Right.
And as that faith grows, you can aim higher,
Yeah. That's encouraging. But I think it's natural to wonder if everyone can do this.
Right.
Why is there still so much suffering in the world? If we can manifest anything, why isn't it all rainbows and unicorns,
That's the age-old question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Goddard's take is that we're all at different points
Mm.
in terms of waking up to this creative power.
Okay.
Some folks are still kind of sleepwalking, going through the motions, unaware of the power they have inside.
So some of us are like rubbing the sleep out of our eyes while others are still dreaming.
That's a great way to put it. And just like waking up can be a bit disorienting.
Yeah.
So can this process of realizing our creative potential,
Mm.
it's a journey. It really is, challenging old beliefs, opening ourselves to new possibilities.
It's like it's an ongoing thing, not a finish line.
Got it. And Goddard believed that as a whole, humanity is on this path,
Yeah.
toward a deeper understanding of consciousness. We're shifting from unconsciously creating things by default
Okay.
to consciously creating things on purpose.
Well, I love that. Going from unconscious creation to conscious creation.
That's the goal.
It gives me hope, that we can build a better future together. But it also makes you wonder, what would a world of conscious creators even look like?
But just imagine, people understanding their thoughts and feelings actually shape the world around them.
Wow.
Their relationships, everything. Instead of being afraid and holding back, they choose love and abundance and working together. What a different world that would be.
It's a beautiful thought, but it
Yeah.
also feels kind of overwhelming. Like, how can we as individuals actually make a difference on such a huge scale?
It starts with each of us owning our thoughts and actions
Okay.
as we become more conscious creators in our own lives.
Yeah.
When we experience this power firsthand, how our assumptions shape our reality,
Right.
it inspires others to do the same.
So it's about walking the walk, showing them how it's done.
Exactly. And as more and more people wake up to this truth, as they start to understand they're co-creators,
Yeah.
we create a ripple effect, a wave that can change the world.
This has been amazing. Such a deep dive into Neville Goddard's The Power of Awareness. It's truly mind-blowing.
Yeah.
What stands out to you as like the biggest takeaway?
For me, it's the reminder that we're not limited by our circumstances.
Right. Right.
We have the power to go beyond those limits to create a life that's truly fulfilling and aligned with our potential.
Yeah,
And that power is within every single one of us.
absolutely. It's a message of hope and possibility,
Yeah.
but it also means we have to be responsible with this power.
For sure.
Use it wisely and with compassion.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners out there who are ready to start this journey of conscious creation, any final thoughts for them?
If you had a magic wand,
Hmm.
and you could create anything you wanted, what would it be? Hold on to that vision.
Yeah.
Feel the joy like it's already happened.
Right.
And trust that you have the power to make it real.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the power of awareness. May your journey be full of wonder, possibility, and the joy of creating the life of your dreams.